What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. I find myself uploading this video at 1:23 a.m. I finished my stream at about, 10:30. We finished it early because the New York Giants traded up and, the draft was over. And we'll probably start the stream tomorrow about an hour after the draft starts because we have about 80 picks until we're on the clock again. Unless, of course, we trade up, in which I'll go live instantly. I could not film for about 2 hours. I planned to much earlier, and I could not focus. I could not think because of how good of a job Joe Schoen and the New York Giants did in day 2 and in day 1 collectively in this NFL draft. I'm going to take you back to the beginning of the offseason. I'm also going to play the video call with Joe Schoen and Brian Dable, which, much like yesterday, I have not watched. It's a longer video, so this is probably going to be a longer video today. But I felt the need to get a reaction video up for you guys. A huge night for the New York Giants. So at the beginning of the offseason, Joe Schoen addressed the linebacker position. He addressed the weapon position, right? I say weapon because the biggest acquisition was a tight end. He also, of course, brought in Paris Campbell, who I think is going to be a very good pickup for the New York Giants, and improved the depth on the defensive line tremendously. So going into this draft, I think we all agreed it was just a matter of which was the area that needed to be improved the most in terms of the biggest need in your opinion. But the three biggest needs in no specific order were center, wide receiver, and of course the cornerback position. I probably would have labeled it corner 1, center 2, wide receiver 3. And that's exactly how it played out in this draft. So Joe Schoen was able to address all three areas of need with the first 3 picks, the 3 biggest areas of need. And you always say you don't want your general manager to draft for need, but it worked out perfectly. I don't have the tweet in front of me, for this video, but I put out a tweet, if you follow me on Twitter, like a week ago, in which I said, what would be the dream scenario for you in the first 3 rounds of this year's draft? And I said, Deonte Banks first. I said, John Michael Schmitz second. And we didn't end up taking my wide receiver, but we ended up taking a better wide receiver than the one that I wanted because I didn't think that Jalin Hyatt would ever fall to where he did. The New York Giants drafted 3 players at their 3 biggest areas of need who were all at one point mocked to go to the Giants in the first round. There were mocks where Hyatt went to 25 to the Giants. There were mocks where Michael Schmitz went 25 to the Giants. And, of course, there were mocks where Deonte Banks went 25th to the New York Giants. You also, if you want to, technically, you could factor in that we got Darren Waller with one of our 3rd-round picks. So through 3 rounds, the way you could really look at it is we got Darren Waller, we got Jalin Hyatt, we got John Michael Schmitz, and we got, of course, Deonte Banks yesterday. I talked about Deonte Banks at great length yesterday and why I thought corner was the best possible selection the New York Giants could make because I obviously thought it was our biggest need or second biggest need, but at a more prominent position than the center spot. I thought it was neck and neck with the center in terms of what was the most immediate need, but I thought you could get value at the center spot and value at the wide receiver spot later in the draft, and that's exactly what happened. We saw a runoff of corners after round 1. I think about 4 or 5 more went before we picked again at 57, and the Giants ended up getting the number 1 center in this year's draft. He wasn't drafted as the number 1 center. I think he was the 3rd center off the board if you include Avila as a center. Of course, the Jets took Tippmann, who many thought that Tippmann may be a better fit for the New York Giants scheme. Of course, we didn't have that option because he had a really good combine and he looked good doing it. But in terms of the most fundamentally sound center, the safest center in this year's draft, it's John Michael Schmitz. And why his value may not have been quite as high as Tippmann for the Jets. He's older. He's 24 years old. And he doesn't have the athletic profile. He doesn't have like an elite athletic profile, but he does everything right. This past year, he had a 92 PFF grade at college, which was the highest of any center in the nation. He only surrendered 1 sack his entire time in college. So I don't know how you can't be thrilled with this pick out of Minnesota. And, of course, the Big Ten is notorious, for growing incredible offensive linemen. So now you look at the New York Giants offensive line. Suddenly you have Andrew Thomas, who's 24. You have John Michael Schmitz, who's 24. You have Evan Neal, who's 22. You have Marcus McKeithen, who's 22. You have Ben Bredesen, who's 25. You have Josh Azudu, who's 23. You have 6 linemen that are 25 years or younger that are all going to be coming up together, growing as a unit with this football team. And I don't think they're done yet. I think they could easily draft another early lineman next year, whether it be the second round, third round, and add another guard to that rotation. But you got to think this offensive line is going to get a whole lot better. So when you go back to the beginning of the offseason and you look what Joe Schoen did, he brought back the franchise quarterback under a pretty cost-effective salary when you factor in the way that he was able to structure it. So he didn't really damage the salary cap with any of these moves he made. And I think the quarterback's going to be improved because of the improvements around him, which we're going to get to, and the fact that he's in the second year of this offense with Brian Dable. So he was able to bring back Daniel Jones. He was able to improve the overall weaponry in this offense. That's not debatable. Trading for Darren Waller, as of now bringing back Saquon Barkley, adding Paris Campbell, adding Jalin Hyatt, bringing back Darius Slayton. So he was able to add, improve upon the weapons, dramatically improve upon the offensive line, because John Michael Schmitz is going to be a big improvement, in my opinion, over John Feliciano, and definitely projects to be at least an average starter in the NFL. And even if he's that would be much better than any center we've had in years for the New York Giants. The Giants have not had a starter start back-to-back seasons since 2017. And even that was only 2 years. That's crazy, right? Schmitz, I think, is going to project to be that guy for hopefully the next decade for this football team. And you were able to get him in the second round. So you improve the offensive line. You got to figure Evan Neal is going to get better as well, along with hopefully Josh Azudu. The defensive line improved dramatically. And to go back to the offensive line real quick, the other thing that this move does for this Giants offensive line, it improves the depth so much. Because before this, you had Bredesen playing out of position, and you were forcing Bredesen, Azudu, and Glowinski all to start. Well, now those three are going to compete for 2 guard spots. So the guard position should be better, and the depth should be better. Because now instead of all 3 starting, 1 will be a depth piece. Because you got to figure, obviously, John Michael Schmitz will be the opening day center. So that improved. On the defensive side, the defensive line improved dramatically with some of the depth signings we brought in. A'Shawn Robinson, of course, late in the process. Nacho, bringing back Dexter, having Leo on the roster. The edge rusher is going to get better. You got to figure Kayvon's going to get better year 2. And Azeez can't continue to, get his hurt as much as he did last year. I guess he could, but you got to figure Kayvon's going to be better. The linebacker position got dramatically better with the addition of Bobby Okereke. And now instead of, starting Fabian Moreau, now you got a first-round pick in Deonte Banks at the other corner spot. And more familiarity within the defensive scheme. So Joe Schoen in one offseason, without really damaging the long-term cap space for this football team, outside of the safety spot, was able to improve every part of this roster. The wide receiver room is incredibly deep. We don't have a wide receiver 1, but it's a very deep wide receiver room, something you couldn't say last year. And we have a legitimate number 1 weapon, obviously, in Darren Waller. And on defense, we're better in every facet. Joe Schoen did a tremendous job throughout this entire offseason, draft included. I have to give this draft an A so far. And again, I mean, we'll see what happens over the course of the years. But Jalin Hyatt was regarded by pretty much everyone as a top 5 or 6 wide receiver in this year's draft. You got him in the 70s. Are you kidding me? I thought he was going to go late first round, early second round, maybe mid-second round. Did not think he would get to the early third round. And I'm very curious to see what Joe Schoen had to say. But that was a dynamite pick. John Michael Schmitz at 57 was a dynamite pick for him to fall to us there. And obviously Deonte Banks. So you filled your 3 biggest needs. It's wild. In terms of what Jalin Hyatt's going to bring to this offense, it's speed. And I think he projects to be the inevitable replacement, more than likely, for Darius Slayton long term. Obviously, Slayton's on this team this year. Could be on the team next year. We'll see. He has a $1.75 million dead cap hit. But Hyatt is a similar receiver. I think he's going to be faster. He ran a 4.4, I think, at his combine. But it was, I think, from what I read, it was because he had some kind of sore leg or whatever it may have been. Most thought he was going to run in the mid to low 4.3s. And when you watch him play on film, he just looks faster than Darius Slayton. He looks like a better athlete. A big play threat, kind of like a Deshaun Jackson. So he's going to be that vertical threat on the outside. That's his long-term role with this team. You obviously have Wan'Dale, whose long-term role is going to be, underneath in the slot, pre-snap motion. And then I think you'll probably get your legitimate number 1 wide receiver next year. That's obviously the plan. But you think about the overall speed right now on this roster. You have Paris Campbell, who ran a 4.31. You have Jalin Hyatt, who has blazing speed. You have Darius Slayton, who's incredibly fast. Darren Waller, who's very fast for a tight end. Saquon Barkley, Wan'Dale Robinson. There's speed all over and mismatches you could create with all of these players. So you better have speed at your cornerback position, especially with the ability for these guys to call plays. So I think both sides of the ball improved dramatically. And with the overall depth taking a major upgrade this year, well, what is that going to do? I think it's going to improve special teams dramatically. But Joe Schoen doing what he did, I mean, I don't know what else to say as a Giants fan. Thank you. I mean, this is the best I think I've ever felt after 2 days of the draft. They literally did better than what my dream scenario was. And yes, I know they traded up to accomplish it, but I'm sure Joe Schoen will talk about it when I watch the press conference as to why he did it. They probably had a top 50 grade on Jalin Hyatt. And when they saw him drop into the low to mid 70s, they said, we got to go up and make sure we get this guy. And now they fill their 3 biggest holes. And now for the rest of the draft, with their 4 picks, I think they got 1 pick in round 5, 1 in 6, 2 and 7. They do whatever they want. They could go running back. They go linebacker. They could add another corner. They could add another offensive lineman. They could go D-line. They could do whatever they want. I don't know what they're going to do. I think they're going to go for depth, though, for sure. So we'll see how it all plays out tomorrow. But they could, if they didn't make another pick, I would be in love with this draft for, to get what they were able to get out of it. So a great start. But now I want to break down the Joe Schoen press conference and see what he had to say.
It was a good player that we liked that was kind of sticking out on our board. So at a position that, we thought he could help us, at receiver, he ran 4.3 and some change. You could feel his speed on film. I mean, that's legit. So just a player we liked, we spent some time with, and, we thought the value was good for what we had to give up to go get him.
How much of a priority has been this offseason to make this offense, particularly passing, more explosive? So that's what he does. Waller, obviously.
Yeah, I would say both sides of the ball, just team speed in general, OD and special teams. So I think we did that with some of the free agents we signed. Paris Campbell can roll, Jeff can roll, Okereke runs well, Banks runs. We've upgraded the speed in general, Waller. So, yeah, that's definitely something watching our team last year. We just felt, we needed to get faster in all 3 phases.
Joe, every time you make a pick, that means you might have to not get another guy, right? So when you look at the totality of today, you get a center who I assume will probably, challenge for a starting job, and you're one of the fastest receivers in this draft. Did you think that was feasible to get these 2 players today?
Not really. It's one of those deals we were joking around after we took the center, and we're just kind of like, hey, I wonder if we can get them both. And so I told the guys, I said, just start making calls when, it looks like we can do it for our 4 when it comes into range. And, we made a couple phone calls, and some teams were interested in doing it. So, yeah, we were ecstatic to be able to get him.
How dangerous of a deep threat guy is Hyatt when you watch him?
Yeah, he could roll. I was at that Alabama game, and I can't remember why I came in late, but I was a little bit late. So, I was on the field for the first half. I was coming from another game, landed there, and then first half I was on the field, and you could really feel his speed. Like, it's legit 4.3.
Quick follow-up to that. Do you typically watch games from the sideline, or is that an outlier?
No, but again, sometimes flight delays and everything else. So I had some issues with my travel, and I was able to get there for pregame, but not enough time to see the body type. So I stayed down there and kind of looked at the guys physically, and then went up to the press box after that. Yeah, you could see more from the press box. I feel like I see it better.
Why do you think he fell when you like a guy like that and he has that kind of speed? Why do you think he fell as far as he did?
I'm not sure. I'm glad he was there, though. Josh Heupel, the head coach at Tennessee, is a good friend of mine. We go way back. Oklahoma was my area a long time ago when he was a quarterback coach, so I've known him.
And you saw that Shane was doing a ton of homework on that Tennessee program. So there you go. Talked about Josh Heupel, how he's good friends with him at the Tennessee program. They did a top 30 visit with Hyatt, and they did a top 30 visit with Hendon Hooker, which garnished more headlines. But when I heard about that, I said, well, that may have something to do with Hyatt, because obviously I didn't think they were taking Hooker, especially if he was going to go in the first 3 rounds. So I said to myself, this could be them getting a feel more so for Hyatt by talking to Hooker to do some homework on him. And you could tell from what Joe Schoen said here, I don't know if that's right. That's just a theory on my part. But you could tell from what Joe Schoen said here that when he went to that game, the Alabama game, which is, of course, the game where Hyatt, I think, had 5 or 6 touchdowns, when it was really the game where he broke onto the scene, he was uber impressed. And he was obviously the standout player in that game. The fact that Shane was in attendance, in the end, probably had a lot to do with why the New York Giants were as interested as they were. He talked about how he looked a legitimate 4-3 on the field, how he was super impressed with him. And yeah, the Giants did their homework and they got their guy. He also talked about how he jokingly said after they took John Michael Schmitz, maybe we'll be able to get both guys, meaning that he never thought he would even fall to where the New York Giants traded up to, which I think was 73, which was 16 picks later. And when he fell to a certain point, the Giants said, yeah, we're going to do what we got to do to be able to add this speed to the roster. He also touched on there how the New York Giants made it a focal point, which is what I talked about at the top of the video, to improve overall team speed. And they got it in bunches. Obviously, Wan'Dale's got speed. Like I said, Paris Campbell, 4.31, right? This guy, I think, is a legitimate 4.35 type player. Slayton, a legitimate 4.4 type player. So they have speed all over the field offensively and defensively. Okereke is obviously a much better athlete than what they had before. So the Giants are looking to get a lot faster this year.
For a long time, and he was the head coach at Central Florida when we took Gabe Davis when we were in Buffalo. So there's some history there. I called him at some point today and just checked in on Hyatt. We had him in on a visit, and again, I'm not sure why I was there, but we feel good about him, and we're glad he was.
What's your impression of Hyatt, and how important was it to you to get more of that speed around Daniel?
Yeah, no, I think he's a good player. I think he's runs some of the routes that we've run here. So you can see, a little bit like Gabe, how it might translate. But again, everything's new for him. He's a young guy. We'll throw him in the mix with the other receivers and let those guys compete it out. But a good visit here. Definitely has some qualities that you like when you're watching him. Good young man. So happy we have him.
Just a quick follow-up.
Sure.
Everybody always is happy with their draft. Nobody walks away saying it sucked, right? But when you look at just what you've done so far, you've kind of hit on 3 needs in these three first picks here. Is that something you anticipated being able to accomplish going into this?
Well, I think you never know. We have a lot of meetings, I would say, leading up to the draft, and then these last few days, and you go through a lot of different scenarios. It's an inexact science, but I'd say there's a lot of preparation. I think Joe does a fantastic job, working the phones and being prepared, along with, I'd say Tim and Brandon and Dennis and the rest of the scouts. They've done a great job. So, again, you draft these players, you put grades on them, you come in, you coach them up, but you let them compete it out. That's what we're all about. So it's just adding new pieces, just like we did in free agency. We'll get them out there on the field and see how they do.
Just real quick, he was asked there if Hyatt's going to start this year, which he kind of said he's going to compete, which he probably will. I don't think he's just going to get handed the starting job. But when you look at this wide receiving core, like I said earlier, the depth now, think about this. You've got Darius Slayton. You've got Isaiah Hodgins. You've got Sterling Shepard. You've got now Hyatt. In addition to that, you brought in Paris Campbell. The competition, you're Wan'Dale Robinson, right? The Giants are going to have a lot of competition, which is what you want going into camp, especially with all the injuries that we always have. Jamison Crowder, Jeff Smith, who we brought in from the Jets. I already named 8 guys. Colin Johnson, 9. So there's going to be a lot of competition at the back end of that depth chart for the wide receiver to see who makes this team, which is exactly what you want. I think a lot of those guys bring different elements as well, and a lot of versatility. So really excited about this wide receiver core. Even though we don't have that number 1, I think we have a lot of 2s and 3s, but we're very deep at that position. And if you include Waller, it's a much improved wide receiving core. So I think that'll be a really interesting camp battle going into camp.
Did what the Eagles did yesterday on their defensive line make the center position that much more of a focus for you today?
Not really. you know, it was a position we were looking the entire offensive line. Again, we look across all of them, but I mean, you're always looking at the division. It's important on how you match up. You know, I go back to when, you know, he was at New England and they had the two really good tight ends. You're always trying to figure out who can cover Gronk or, you know, whoever it may be. So, yeah, you're always looking at it. But I think, you know, being strong on the offensive and defensive line, regardless, is always going to be a priority of ours. So,
What do you
Schmitz
like-
is a great kid. I know we haven't talked about him, but, I mean, smart, tough, dependable, you know, played a lot of ball, had a great Senior Bowl. You know, he's a good player and a great kid.
What do you like about the pairing of him specifically with Daniel, kind of the way those two can operate together? If he ends that starting job.
Yeah, we'll see how it works out. I know we've, you know, spent time with him. And he's a great kid. He embodies what we want to be about, and he's a good football player. So again, everybody's going to come in here, compete, earn their spot, and you know, we'll see how it falls. But you know, he's wired the right way.
Just a couple of the knocks on Jalin, a little bit kind of slight. I'm just kind of parroting what people are saying. You watch a lot of film. When you look at the frame and his body type, what gives you the confidence that maybe he can either grow into it or he can play with that body type in the NFL?
Yeah, I think he's still young. I think there's a similar body type down the road that we play twice a year. You know, that's a good player, was drafted much higher. But yeah, again, you look at it, you look at the group, you know, how tall they are, long they are, thick they are. And you know, I know the offensive staff and Dave's, they do a great job of putting guys in the best position to succeed. And what are the routes they run best? How can we accentuate what they do well? And then they'll kind of formulate, you know, the offense around that. So, you know, I think he'll be fine.
Joe, Schmitz was the one guy you didn't trade up for. Is that because you felt he was going to fall, or because you felt there were a lot of guys at 57?
I wish. I wish. Yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball. Yeah, it's hard. You know, patience, I wouldn't say is one of my strengths, and I often get tested this time of year because it's like anything. If you want it and you have the resources to get it, like, go get it. And I've been on the other side of that when you're sitting there kicking yourself for not doing something, and you don't like the subsequent result from not doing what you could have done, and you were okay with, you know, what it was going to cost you. So, yeah, I mean, Chicago jumped up in front of us, and, you know, you thought, okay, maybe, you know, who knows what they're going to take. So there were a couple of players there we would like, but you got to be at peace with that if it happens and say, hey, let's just stay patient. And we did that. And, you know, any type of move up would have cost us another pick, and then maybe you don't end up with Jalin. So, you know.
I wish what the reporter would have asked him there, because I was curious myself, because I thought the same thing. When the Bears jumped the Giants, I thought the Bears were going John Michael Schmitz because one of their biggest needs on their team was a center. And they jumped right in front of the Giants. And I thought it was pretty obvious that the Giants were going to go Schmitz, or definitely could go Schmitz. So it would be a reason to jump them if you were Chicago. When they didn't take him, I was borderline shocked. But if Schmitz was taken, what I think I would have asked him, and I don't know if somebody does, would you have taken Jalin Hyatt at 57? Because you were willing to trade up to 73 to get him. I think there's a very good chance they would have at that point, because Hyatt was one of the best players on the board. So it's just funny how that worked out, because I think they probably would have taken him had John Michael Schmitz been taken the pick before from the Bears.
I'm glad it worked out the way it did.
Would you say that last year you really couldn't do this to the level you did this year? You know what I mean? You needed more picks last year. This year, is that fair to say you can cherry pick a little more?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think we had a few more resources in free agency, so we were able to add more depth pieces in March and April, you know, along with maybe some of those practice squad guys we had last year that had developed, or, you know, the Isaiah Hodgins of the world. So had a little bit more depth. We added some, you know, starting pieces in free agency, or guys that'll compete for starting spots. So maybe you don't need the, you know, the depth and the numbers that I felt like we needed last year.
Was Hyatt a guy that you would have considered where you took Schmitz?
He was in the range. He was in the range.
When you guys both talked about.
Well, there you go. He was asked it. He just asked him, is Hyatt a guy that you would have considered where you took Schmitz? I guess if Schmitz was off the board. And he said he was in the range. So maybe he wouldn't have, maybe would have. We'll never know.
From a receiver perspective in this offense, how complicated it is.
All right, I thought you'd ask like an offensive line question. Okay,
just took
all right, we
one.
keep this receiver.
But just in terms of the complicated nature of the routes you guys run in this offense, for Jalin, I would imagine he has a diverse game to be able to run what you guys run at different spots in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say this with all the players, particularly the young ones that come in, you evaluate them on tape, and then you get them here, and you try to do what they do well. You have a good idea of watching the tape, but sometimes they come in and they can do a few more things that maybe you didn't think they could do, or maybe you don't want to do as much as you thought you would do with one of them. So, our job as a coaching staff, our offensive coaches, whether it's receivers, tight ends, running backs, is let's figure out what these guys do well, and then we have a pretty expansive system, which I'm sure most people do. But once you pare it down and find out who's going to be running those things, then you make sure you adapt and do the things that your players can do well, whether it's quarterback, the receivers, blocking schemes with the line, defensive players. That's the job of a coaching staff. But yeah, and our other third-round pick was Waller, so we try to do what we can do with him too.
It's true.
He stole my joke. I said that on Twitter. He's part of the draft. I said that at the top of the video. Great minds think alike, Dabes.
So I'll give you the
That pick's
offensive
coming
line
up
question
probably.
then. I mean, is that?
One more time.
I'll give you the offensive line question then. When you have a young guy coming in like Schmitz, how much of it is can he handle the physical load, but also the mental capacity to be able to do this job?
Yeah, I think that's regardless if it's this offense or any other offense. It's you're coming in from college and you're playing against grown men up front. So I'd say there's a learning curve mentally, but there's also a physical curve too. We won't find that out until August, but this guy's tough. He's smart. He's got a good frame, former wrestler, good leader. So we'll throw him in the mix, let him compete it out with the other guys, and see how it ends up.
How important was
Both
that?
you guys on the offensive line, on Schmitz, he kind of, when we had him in the conference call, described himself as nasty. He sounded like kind of a polite young man on the telephone. So
Yeah.
is that something that you've seen on film? Did you notice that when you took him to dinner? What's your take on that?
Yeah, you see it on film.
Yeah, you see it on film. Yeah.
He's a
Not
good
when you're sitting
finisher.
across from him, but you throw on the film, you see it.
Nothing bad happened during dinner or anything like that?
No, he's a. I mean, we did a FaceTime with him, the whole group, and he basically wanted to put his helmet and shoulder pads on like that instant, standing with his parents. So he loves the game of football, and just another good offensive lineman to work with.
So you saw a lot of things where Schmitz and Tippmann were, almost interchangeable. One could go in front of you. Did you like Schmitz more than Tippmann?
Yeah, there was a lot of offensive linemen we liked in this draft, and they went through, I don't want to get into how we have them ranked or something, but they're both good football players, both in New York, and I think they'll both have successful careers.
Brian, yesterday we saw Wink give a pretty aggressive hug to the general manager after the cornerback. As the head coach, are you allowed to express that when you get a 4-3 receiver? I mean, or do you
Sure.
have to
No,
be-
I did it with the defensive with Tay too. Look, these guys, Joe does a great job, like I said, of leading the entire draft with the people that they're just these scouts that are busting their tail and they're gone for 6 months. They might have however many people that they want to select, and we don't select any of them from their area. If you can imagine that, they're gone from their families, they're working their tails off, but they do a great job of setting up the board, communicating with the coaches. It's a really good process, but I'd say this guy leads it up. He does a great job of it.
I actually asked the wrong question. How did Kafka respond to the pick of the receiver?
No, he's jacked up too. Yeah, him, Mike Grove. Yeah, everybody was. Yeah, Kafka was excited about the center too.
Brian, obviously, Schmitz is a center, right? And you guys have talked about maybe having Ben play a little center. So how does that work? Will Ben compete with Schmitz at center? Do you want Ben as your left guard? How do you see that? How do you see Ben's role, I guess, shaking out?
We'll find out. We'll throw them all out there, and again, we haven't had practice yet. We've selected some new players, some free agents. We'll start phase 2 on Monday, which is a little bit different from phase 1, but can't get out in front of each other until we get to phase 3. And then, that's really a teaching type of camp, if you will. I don't think you want to put too much on the rookies early on because, let's be honest, they've been on the road. Tay's been on the road however many visits. They have to, kind of reacclimate themselves, and you want to be smart with them and, slowly integrate them into the system. But, that's what you do every year. You try to build as much competition for your roster as you can, and that's what we're trying to do.
Joe, how much of a mind game is it when you're in the draft room and you're picking second round saying, well, if I take the center now, am I still going to get the wide receiver? Or how do you play that? Do you just take the best player or what?
Yeah, in that case, we did, and we weren't even really thinking about that. We weren't thinking about the subsequent pick. You're really, there's something out there that you want or you desire, and you're waiting and waiting and waiting. Don't know if it's going to be there. That's tough, and it can be stressful. So that's why, again, sometimes you're aggressive, sometimes you move back. Last year in the second round, we moved back twice. So based on the situation, who's there, where you are as a roster, you're always taking that into account. We met extensively today and, went through different scenarios in the roster and kind of wants and needs on the roster. And, I think, worked out well for us this evening.
When you're talking to so many different teams like you were tonight, looking into trade ups, how many different people are on the phone at once? Like, are you on the phone? Is Brandon making some of these calls? Like, how is that all working?
Yeah, last night, again, the first round, it's a little bit slower. You get more time to turn in your pick. There's, you've been through, again, those so many different scenarios, especially last night. So that was more myself. And then today it's a group effort. Dave's actually executed his first trade. He initiated the trade with the with the Rams. So I congratulate him on that. But no, if you know somebody, hey, why don't you shoot the Rams a text or, give them a call. And again, we'll, hey, this is what it looks like it would be. Does it make sense? And then, we call and just, hey, when you're on the clock, let us know.
So is that a FaceTime trade then?
That was a text.
No, that was not a FaceTime trade. No. It's like,
we had to type it in his phone for him. He said, here, you just type it in for me.
yeah, I'm a FaceTimer. That's about it. Oh, that's great. I'm gonna go get a cheeseburger right now.
So there you go. I mean, not a whole lot to add. I mean, they pretty much said a lot of the things I said. And I think the Giants may have taken Hyatt had John Michael Schmitz not been on the board. And for them to get both those guys tonight, if you're not happy tonight as a Giants fan, I don't think you'll ever be happy on a draft night. You ended up getting a top 7 or 8 receiver at the very worst. You ended up getting a top 2 or 3 center. And you ended up getting a top 3 or 4 corner in this year's draft class. And those just so happen to be our 3 biggest areas of need going into the draft. Things are looking up in Giants land. And we'll see how we fill out the rest of the roster. But I think this team is looking more and more like they're going to be ready to compete week 1 come the 2023 regular season. It's the best second day I've experienced since I've been doing these live streams now for 5 years on YouTube. And I don't even think it's very close. Or at least it feels that way. For us to finally get that center, that guy that feels like he's going to be the long-term answer, and to get that really nice piece for this offense in a Jalin Hyatt, I'm excited. I hope you guys are too. As always, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.